Good morning and welcome to the 20th Anniversary 215 Festival. My name is Feliza Casano and I am a programming coordinator for the festival. If you like today's event, you can keep up with festival events all year long by signing up for our newsletter at 215festival.org. This event has closed captioning available. Click the CC button at the bottom of your screen to turn on or off the closed captioning. Please note that this event is also being recorded. It is my honor to welcome the moderator for today's event, Eric Smith. Eric Smith is a young adult author and literary agent living with PS Literary, living in Philadelphia. His latest novel, Don't Read the Comments, was published by Inkyard Press in January 2020 and was a YALSA 2021 Best Fiction for Young Adults selection. The paperback came out just this April. His upcoming book, You Can Go Your Own Way, publishes on November 2nd and is available for pre-order now with lots of cute stickers and buttons. His next anthology, Battle of the Bands, co-edited with Lauren Gibaldi, published September 14th with Candlewick. He has short stories in the anthologies Color Outside the Lines, Body Talk, and All Signs Point to Yes. His other books include the indie-bound bestseller, The Geek's Guide to Dating, Inked, the adoption-themed anthology Welcome Home, and The Girl in the Grove. And with that, I'll hand it off to Eric.
Awesome. Hi, thank you for having me and letting me host all these wonderful people. This is so exciting. I miss seeing all of you in person. I mean, we all live in and around Philadelphia. We should be in coffee shops right now, like hanging out all the time. And I'm very happy that it seems like we're gonna get there very soon. And yeah, I'm just so pleased to welcome, Cordelia Jensen, I.W. Gregorio, Sonia Belasco, Karen McCauley. You all write such wonderfully diverse and inclusive stories. And it's just such a joy to get to hang out with you for just a little while, even virtually. And instead of me going into your bios, I'd love it if we just went around and you introduced yourselves and talked a little bit about your books. Why don't we start with Cordelia, because you're in my corner up there.
Hi. Do you see me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I lost myself for a minute. All right. Hi, I'm Cordelia Jensen. I am here in Mount Airy in Philadelphia, and I have written 3 different verse novels. I have Skyscraping, which came out in 2015, loosely based on my own father passing from AIDS during a different health crisis. And it takes place in 1993, 1994. And then I have another verse novel, The Way the Light Bends, about 2 sisters, one adopted and one biological, but the adopted one fits in with the family a lot better than the biological one. And it's more about her journey, and she's a photographer and being really creative in a success academic driven world. And then I have Every Shiny Thing, which is a middle grade and a very shiny book, a middle grade novel that I co-authored with my friend Laurie Morrison, and she writes the prose section, and then I write in verse, and it's 2 different characters. My character is a foster kid who moves in next door to a wealthier girl. It's got a little bit of a Robin Hood kind of tale. And I am a creative writing teacher. I've taught the Writing for Children class 4 times at Bryn Mawr. I currently teach for the Highlights Foundation, verse novel specific classes. And I also teach for the Kelly Yang Project, one-on-one with kids in Hong Kong. And then I run a kids literary journal called the Airy Musers for local kids around here. And yeah, that's a bit about me.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here. And as like a grown-up cranky adopted kid who like really struggled finding good books that had good representation, I just like loved Where the Light Bends. Like,
oh, thank you.
I'm very grateful for your books being out there. And Eileen, why don't you go ahead? You're next in my corner up there.
Sure. So I'm Eileen Wong Gregorio, or IW, as people don't know me. I am a doctor and writer in the sort of Philly suburbs, and My most recent novel is This Is My Brain in Love, and it also recently came out in paperback and won the American Library Association Schneider Family Book Award for representation of disability. And in many ways, it is the book of my heart. I like to call it my happy book about mental illness. And it is very loosely inspired by my own experience growing up in Central New York as the daughter of immigrants and growing up where I didn't even have the language to talk about anxiety and depression. That's sort of the heavier aspect of the book, but book can also be described actually as a foodie rom-com. It's about two kids coming together, both people of color and both suffering from their own mental illnesses and trying to save the main character's family restaurant. My first novel was None of the Above, which came out in 2015, which is a long time ago. And was pitched as Middlesex meets Mean Girls. And it's the story of an 17-year-old girl who finds out right after she's elected homecoming queen that she was born intersex, neither male nor female, but something in between. And it is a book that kind of sprouted from my medical career. I'm a urologist, and you can insert your joke there. And it also inspired me to become a bit of an intersex advocate for intersex body autonomy rights. And so I'm on the board of Interact Advocates, and I'm also one of the founding members of We Need Diverse Books.
Awesome, welcome, welcome. Sonia, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. My name is Sonia Belasco. I live in West Philly. My first book came out in 2017, which also feels like a long time ago. It's called Speak of Me as I Am. It's about a boy and a girl who both lose people close to them and then kind of find each other and connect over that loss. There's a lot of stuff in there about theater. They put on a production of Othello, and just kind of that experience of being young and sort of coping with loss. I also write romance, and I'm sort of working on a series at the moment that's set in LA and that is very focused around food. So I love books that are about food. And I'm also in a program right now to get my MLIS to become a librarian. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Welcome, welcome. And Harry, why don't you go next?
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Kiri McCauley. I'm in Haverford, Pennsylvania. I write young adult contemporary books that usually have a hint of magic in them. My debut was If These Wings Could Fly. It came out in March of last year, so right as everything shut down. And it's about a small rural town that's invaded by 100,000 crows. And it's about the family at the center of it and their struggle with domestic violence. It was the 2021 Morris Award winner. And I wrote this book because I'm a survivor of domestic violence myself. So it was really important to me that that topic about familial violence be seen on bookshelves for kids. My background is actually in advocacy. I worked as a counselor in domestic violence clinics, and I worked for a maternal health organization in Philly for several years before I started writing.
Excellent, welcome, welcome. Oh my goodness, so well, to say this like last year and a half was a bit of a challenging time for everybody is a bit of a massive understatement. And I know that at every single like virtual conference or festival, people talk about writing the pandemic and what it's been like the past year and a half. But really it's about a lot more than that, right? All of us have kind of navigated these challenging times as writers and dug into those challenging times as writers and reflected in all of your work. So I'm curious, what drives you to write, tackling these dark kind of personal subjects in a way that, I don't know, potentially gives people hope when they read your books. What is that force there?
It's really funny. I think that so I think about a lot of this when I think about what my brand is as an author. And so as you guys know, Eric, as you know, as an agent, a lot of publishers ask their clients their right authors to have established brand, like so someone that you can go to for instance, for a vampire novel, for a thriller, and I'm neither of those types of authors. But when my books are somewhat different, but I think that the one thing that ties them all together and that ties all of our books together is that I think that we all write books that start conversations, because we all try to bring readers into a world that they're not necessarily familiar with, and increase and improve empathy and allow certain people to see themselves and others to just see their people around them more clearly. And to be able to start discussions about difficult topics, certainly discussions that I feel like I never had as a child. And so that's I write because I was a really lonely, isolated person growing up in upstate New York, basically the Pennsylvania of New York, and I never felt like I really fit in or knew how to negotiate so many aspects of life with other people. And books were my windows into those worlds. Books are what gave me my, my moral compass. And books were my first friends in many ways. And so that's why I write.
That's amazing. I love the books are conversations concept. Yes, absolutely. Anyone else?
I think I write more like serious subjects and really like more beautiful and sad stories, because that's what I like to read. And I've always, and I guess being a kind of sensitive person, that's always what I've kind of liked to consume, even as a young kid. I think because Skyscraping it began as poetry that I'd written all through my 20s. It kind of set up my brand, I guess, but I probably wouldn't, I've never tried to even write like a funny story. So maybe I could, but yeah. So I think it's kind of just my natural, it fits my temperament. And I also do have a counseling background, and I worked with teens and kids all through my 20s too. So I think I also write for some of those kids that I worked with.
I really like the idea of a bridge as like a book is like a bridge to kids. And, we can, and I thought about this a lot in the pandemic, and a lot about the concept of home and a private life, and this idea that like we really don't know what kids are struggling with. So, and teachers and educators might not know either. But when you have these kinds of topics in books, instead of broaching the topic out of nowhere, you can hand them a book, and it's like handing them a lifeline. And like Eileen said, it's this conversation starter, but it can also just be something that they take with them back into their home and process on their own, and sort of figure out for themselves what they might need or what questions they need to ask. So I think it's this incredible like tool that kids can then use to navigate whatever it is that they're going through in their private lives.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a similar thing of that. I think that books are this incredible way to connect with people. And I've thought about that a lot, like in this last year and a half, where it feels like I think that a lot of us have been feeling especially isolated, and kind of deprived of that ability to connect to each other. That books still give you that opportunity to sort of to see the ways in which we are similar to each other and have shared experiences. And that's kind of a lot of what drives me, I think, in writing, is trying to reflect some of those things that I think that we share with each other. Because I think it's very easy to feel, even in our kind of hyper-connected world, in a way, it's very easy to feel isolated. And I know that both for myself as a teenager, and also like I've also done a lot of work with teenagers as a kind of mentor and therapist. And that's probably the number one thing that I sort of would hear from teenagers, is that they just don't feel like they feel like they're not sort of connected in the way that they want to be, or that they're somehow weird or different. And I think books help us to see the ways in which our experiences are all, valid, and actually more similar than we may realize.
These are all such great answers. Oh my goodness. Also, I haven't done like a festival panel in, I don't know, like a year. I'm not even sure. So I do apologize that I totally didn't share any of these questions with you before the panel. Like when I printed this out, I was like, oh, I didn't email this to anyone. So hopefully none of these feel like they're like terrifying on the spot questions or anything like that. So one really wonderful thing, I noticed while everyone was talking, and I wrote this down here earlier, is that all of you do have jobs and careers where you do a lot of good outside of your writing, right? Like IW, you're a surgeon. Kira, you talked about working in nonprofits. Sonia talked about mentoring and working with teens. Cordelia, you run a literary journal for kids. You're a wonderfully giving bunch. And I think writers tend to be giving people, I don't know, that's just kind of who we are. But how does your life in giving back also affect your writing?
Well, I can say that for the past year of my life as a doctor has made it completely impossible for me to write because I'm so drained at the end of the day. But besides that, a lot of people ask why a doctor became a writer, but I think it's more important to ask how a writer became a doctor, because I was always, a reader and I wanted to be a writer first. And what happened was that during high school, I was realizing that all the stories I was writing were just, pastiches of the books that I've already read, and I hadn't found my own story yet. And medicine for me has been a springboard into understanding people better. Every time I talk to a patient, I now try to delve a little bit into their home lives and to figure out who they are outside of the clinic. And that was actually really important for me after the 2016 election, because I live in a very purple area. And so I've never really felt like I've been in a bubble. I've had people come in with MAGA hats or, come in, with Trump keychains, and like I have to figure out who they are and understand where they're coming from. And so that has been, my inspiration as a person to try to understand other points of view and to be able to put them into writing. In general, though, doctoring is about discovering stories. And so there's a huge tradition of physician authors, including, Chekhov and William Carlos Williams and Michael Crichton, of course.
I think for me, the thread that I see that connects like my counseling background and then teaching creative writing and then working with kids in this literary journal and then also writing stories with characters is that in all of those places, I think I'm trying to help build and guide a voice and give whoever it is a sense of confidence and treat them respectfully. Like, when you're teaching, obviously you're sometimes giving, critical feedback, but you can do that in ways that people can hear it. And I think you're sort of doing that sometimes with your characters too, helping them to be their most like honest, authentic selves.
Yeah, I think, similar to what Cordelia said, I think that a lot of, certainly my work as a therapist has been about giving people a space in which to tell their stories. I think that that's in some ways one of the most valuable things you can do for people is just that act of kind of listening. And then I think writing is a form of reflecting that, like that sort of that you have, that you sort of see and are listening to the world around you, and are able to kind of reflect that back to people. And I think that's a very powerful thing.
I would say my background in advocacy, the work that I was doing was very much based in like trauma-informed care. And I think that those skills and that awareness has been really crucial as I moved over into writing and telling stories. And if you're talking about more serious issues in your writing, who are you talking to, and how are you addressing those issues with your primary concern being maybe someone else who's been victimized by something similar. So those skills that I learned in working with clients and as a counselor absolutely translate to what if this was a teenager writing a story for, and how can I connect with them in a way that, you know, lets them explore this topic safely and in a way that makes them still feel like secure. And then the other role that I had in nonprofits was fundraising. I worked in development for a while, and that was absolutely storytelling. It was all about crafting a narrative and getting people to care about the issues that we were trying to address, and sometimes actually sitting down and writing stories in a way that might compel people to get involved in our nonprofit.
It's amazing. I love all this storytelling through helping people. That's amazing. So Eileen, what drives you to write when you're kind of dealing with that writer's block situation? Like you were saying, like, I mean, I guess it's not so much writer's block as it's you just can't do it because there's so much going on. But like, what brings you back to it?
Yeah, deadlines definitely help. And agreeing to write things like for short story. It's actually the only original thing I've really written in the past year were was a short story for one anthology and an essay for another anthology, and they are both painful but also really great to get back into the game because they reminded me of why I wanted to write and how so much of the pandemic has just been chaos and just so much input from so many different directions, from the work, from the kid aspect, the parenting aspect, from the news. I mean, just sensory overload. And the act of writing and being able to focus and laser point your argument on one thing was really, really wonderful. And it's interesting. My second short story was written for an anthology coming up called Bridges and Islands, which Eric, I think that you're part of as well, right?
Hey.
Yeah. So it's a story about people who bridge, different cultures, whether through marriage or parenting or through, who live across cultures and have to separate themselves into different parts. And so my deadline for that story was actually right around the Atlanta shootings. And I had already planned on writing about it, obviously about a mixed race, Asian Caucasian person. And that just all these events from the outside world flipped the way I was telling the story and made me become and also an event where someone used the N-word in my son's elementary school. I mean, it all crystallized into this essay and like really helped me work through all of those issues. And so, I mean, I think writing for me has always been very therapeutic. And it's especially been important for me as a mother to be able to work through these issues that I want to discuss with my kids. And so that's what's, and also the promise of being able to be on panels with people like you. That's why I write.
You said something really interesting there when you were talking about working on that essay and the short story and how they were these like painful stories. There's this writer, who said it? Darn it. Now I have to look at my book. Erin Bowman. She was another YA writer, and she talks a lot about mining your life when it comes to your work. And I feel like a lot of everybody here kind of does that in your stories. How do I put this? How do you mine your life for your work without it getting too painful? Like, do you have support systems in place for when you're writing? Like, how does that process work?
I'll do it. I'll take it. Well, Skyscraping is obviously the closest. Like it started out as a memoir, and then I switched it. But when I wrote it when I went to VCFA to get my MFA in writing for children and young adults, and I had an advisor there who first introduced me to YA verse novels, and then another advisor who said, like, you really should fictionalize this to kind of protect your own heart and also like maybe your family members. So I think, like, for example, some part in the editing process with Skyscraping, when it actually sold, my editor, Liza Kaplan, she said, why don't you change the names of these characters? Because originally the main character was named Leah, Lia, and my sister's name is Julia, and the sister's name is Jewel. They were just like they're like basically my family's names. And so she had me change the characters' names, and it really helped me, even just that tiny thing, make it a little bit less hard to write. Because there were parts of it, like especially the part where she's really angry at her father, was really hard for me because I basically just miss my dad. But in order to get back to that anger, it helped me to change the name. So I think if you're writing from your life, it can help, like, just changing. You can take the heart of something and know the emotional trajectory of characters, but then build another world around it, and change, tweak it, to make it a little less hard to write.
Yeah, no, that makes
Yeah, I
sense.
think for me, like in my first book, one of the characters is a survivor of suicide. And I am also a survivor of suicide. But I think, and that was obviously a big component of like what sort of drove me to write the book, because it was one of those things where I felt like I hadn't actually seen that reflected very much in books, like that experience of being the sort of person left behind, I guess, in a way. But my main character is male and is like different than me in a lot of ways. And I think that in some ways that was the only way that I was going to be able to write about it, was to filter it through something that gave me a little bit of distance. Because I think that in writing, weirdly, you kind of need that balance between like what's very personal, but also like enough distance to be able to actually write about it. So I think I don't know, I think that can be important, like what you're saying, Cordelia, like to even just changing names or, shifting things in some way that gives you that ability to be like, to see this person as a character and not kind of just as yourself, or as your experience. And it was also it was interesting for me too, I think, to think about the way in which this character would experience it somewhat differently than I did. I think in some ways it goes back to that piece of like seeing the connection, like you have similar experiences, but also are different, if that makes sense.
When I was drafting my first book, Wings, which is about domestic violence, and I'm a survivor too, and I thought that I would be fine because I had already spent so many years in advocacy, and I'd sort of convinced myself that I'd built up this wall that would enable me to write about it from a really objective standpoint. And for most of drafting, that was the case. It was when I started pitching the book and getting rejections from agents or from editors, and the words that were in those rejections felt like a rejection of my experiences. And some of them talked about, my character's lack of agency. And it felt very much like, why don't they just leave? So that was really difficult. I wasn't anticipating that to be as hard as it was. But then, when it did land an agent, when it did find a book deal, that felt like a huge validation of those experiences, and felt like I could actually address the kinds of things that my book was being rejected for in the narrative of the book, which was, there's a reason that she didn't leave. And, agency is a really difficult thing to exercise when you're a minor in a violent home. So it all circled back around and ended up being really cathartic. But in that moment, I thought I was in the clear and could just talk about it. And those rejections felt very personal for those reasons.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. So why don't we talk a little bit about what's next for everybody? Because we've been talking a lot about the emotions and all that goes into the craft here, but like, you'll have books. Let's talk about these books. Kiri, I just like pre-ordered. It's We Can Be Heroes, right? Yeah. Tell us about it.
Thank you for pre-ordering. We Can Be Heroes is it's a friendship book. It's about a trio of girls that are navigating the aftermath of a violent incident in their hometown. And when the rest of the world kind of moves on from that violent incident, it makes them angry and they double down and form a vengeance plan instead. But the book really navigates grief and anger and, you know, how those things sort of change us fundamentally, which I wrote during the pandemic. And it's not surprising that those are the themes that came up in my writing. But it's also, you know, very much about friendship and how it endures. And, you know, what are the, if a friendship ends, what do you take on from there? What do you carry with you? How do you honor someone that you love? And there's, again, like a magical element. It's a ghost story. So we actually get the perspective of the victim in the story. And there's an element of like a podcast and this conversation about true crime and violence against women, and, you know, sort of flipping that narrative from sensationalizing it to really digging into the issues behind it. So that's, I have it here. We Can Be Heroes. It's out this fall.
Awesome, awesome. Does anyone else have something they're working on or we're going to see soon that you can talk about?
Well, I have something I'm working on, but I don't know if you're going to see it soon. I've been working a lot on a verse novel workbook because I teach the form so much and there's so little out there craft wise. So I have a proposal for a workbook on submission, but I don't know if you're ever going to see it. but I do think, I really believe that it should exist in the world. So if anybody knows of a publisher that might be interested, I have the ideas. I have it all.
Great idea.
And then I've been working on a couple of other manuscripts. So I'm not done, so can't say anything more about that.
It's all right. We all have our secret projects. Absolutely.
But I just wouldn't be very articulate. Okay.
So let's see. We have about 15 minutes left. Oh, but there's only like 3 attendees in here, so maybe we're not gonna have a lot of questions. I don't know. Does anyone have any questions that they want to pop in to the Q&A there? Otherwise, I'm going to ask like wildly specific things about everyone's books.
No, I got Eric. I want to catch up and ask you how the writing world has felt as an agent during the pandemic, because I feel like I've been stasis. You know, like I have no idea how my book is doing. I have no idea whether anyone's ever actually reading it. Like it's a little bit of a lost year. And Carrie, I can't imagine debuting in March because my book came out in April, and it felt like a debut because it'd been 5 years between my books, and it just was like, yeah, sad.
Yeah.
Word.
It's strange because like book sales are like up like across the board during the pandemic year. Like they sold more books than ever.
But is it just specific books though? You know what I mean? Like is there a wider gap between rich and poor the way there is everywhere else in the world?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I didn't see the specifics of like what books it were when the sale. Oh, hi. You okay, buddy? Okay. Like I know nonfiction book sales were up a lot, and but kidlit sales also went up a whole bunch. But I don't know if it was just front list or just backlist. But they went up, you know, and I do see agent friends and editors still selling and acquiring books. So it feels like things are still going. But it feels like one of those situations where it's like everyone's pretending like everything's okay, you know, even while it's feeling like it's not. I don't know. I sold a couple books and it seems like my authors are happy, but it's still a weird time to want to celebrate anything, you know, you just stay at home. You know, here's a good question for all of you. What do you wish people asked you more about when it comes to these kind of panels? Like what kind of questions do you wish came up more?
Okay, I'm going to ask you guys each one question. What is your favorite bit of reader feedback? that's my favorite question to ask, because I think that it solidifies and makes us remember who's reading your books.
Oh, I like that.
This is sort of feedback, but so Every Shiny Thing is read a lot in classrooms. With it's a good book for like book club classrooms. There's a lot of issues in it. But Laurie and I did a school visit virtually this year, and the group of kids had made a website all about Every Shiny Thing, and there were facts, and like they made, so one part of Every Shiny Thing is that Sierra, my character in it, she has this kaleidoscope and she sees that her mother gave her, and every color in the kaleidoscope represents a different mood, and then so some days she'll feel like she's blue or green or yellow, and they each made like little sections, like their pictures of when they're blue versus red versus yellow. So it was just so cool to see like these kids take all their personal experiences and like within the frame that is the story that we created. And like you never know the journey that your book is going to have and who it's going to touch. You kind of can picture it like a floating down a river, bumping into different rocks, and you don't always get that feedback back. You don't always get to see that. So that was just a really cool thing that we actually got to see.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like anytime that I get feedback from people that's like, you really got this thing right. Like it seems like something that, it seems real, it seems authentic in a way, or like it reflects, what their experience is. I've gotten feedback like that, and that's always really meaningful to me, because I think it's true. It's like when, writing can be a very solitary sort of act, and then you kind of put it out in the world, and then there's just like crickets, like you don't really you don't really know like what happens to it a lot of the time. So anytime you get that kind of response where somebody says, no, this actually like really connected or really resonated, I think is awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've had a similar response and similar reactions. And one of the choices I made with Wings was to focus more on like emotional abuse and the way that the tension kind of builds, and move away from sensationalizing violent acts themselves. And one of the worries I had there was that people would sort of read it as like, well, it's not that serious, or, the character's overreacting to what's happening in the home. But it was really important to me that I focus on that aspect of domestic violence and how it escalates. So probably my favorite feedback has been people who, see themselves in that situation and come to terms with the fact that, they thought it was unpleasant the way that they grew up, but wouldn't have actually classified it themselves as domestic violence, and sort of like redefining what that means for some readers and validating those experiences too, because it doesn't necessarily have to be hospitalization for it to be incredibly serious and, within the realm of what that experience is.
I think my favorite feedback is always when people read my book and want to pass it on to others. So one of the most amazing things was when I asked Laurie Anderson to blurb it, and she said that she gave it to her daughter. Like that was, and it's funny, after I had an Inquirer profile, and I had all these patients of mine start reading my books, like, so 80-year-olds, coming in and be like, Dr. Wong, we saw that article. And they're like, number one, it's nice to know that people actually still read the print newspaper. But and I had this 80-year-old woman who like gave it to her grandson who's at Temple University. And I'm like, that's so cool. I think that anytime anyone wants to share your work with other people, that like, again, that goes back to the whole idea of starting conversations and sharing, literature and emotions and thoughts, and being able to talk about things afterwards.
I guess one more big question is like, what advice would you offer any of these people that are listening to us right now when it comes to writing in these like challenging times, like our aspiring writers who are watching this video right now? What is that one gem that you would dish to them?
I would say to write from whatever you're feeling in the moment. Like if you feel stuck, to write about it. And or I would say to, if you're stuck in a project, like if you're actually drafting something, to write the part that excites you, like, or write the end, or do something out of order. That I think that can sometimes unlock writers that are feeling stuck.
Do you know the end of your books when you start them? I'm just curious, because I know a lot of writer friends who like, they have the ending in their mind as they start writing the book.
I always have like the emotional end, like what I can like, it's often not plot, but like I can see where they are at like a mood of it.
Cool. What about you, Sonia? What advice would you dish?
I think just generally to keep going. Like, I think this is a thing that I've struggled with in the last year and a half, especially. I mean, I think it's just, it can be really hard when there's so much going on around you and in the world. And I think just trying to have that kind of drive behind whatever that your story that you're trying to tell is worthwhile, even if there are, you know, any number of other things happening in the world. And that's kind of the big thing that I think I've just that no matter what's happening, that stories are still important and that your story is important. So
I think also like journaling or writing a poem or a picture book or something that you don't like, do a different kind of writing if you're stuck in a novel.
I would also say, and this is hard for me to listen to too, that it's okay to not write sometimes, and it's okay to step away from it. I handed in copy edits in like January, I think, and I've just been totally burnt out by then. So, you know, my partner and I have been working only from home for 14 months. We've had virtual school in our living room for our kids. We had to cancel pre-K and no childcare. So I think it's also okay to just say like, hey, this year has been really tough and our wells have all run dry and maybe we need to take a beat and fill those things back up and, you know, approach the story from a new angle when we're in a healthier mindset. Because I've spent a lot of time not just not writing, but feeling so guilty that I'm not writing, which I think doesn't help the situation. So breaks are okay. You don't have to write every day and you can still call yourself a writer and you are a writer.
Amen to that. Because I definitely have these huge fallow periods in between. I mean, I probably wouldn't have written another book if I had had to write a whole book. One of the things my very tricky agent did was had me sell on proposal, 30 pages in an outline. And it was terrifying, but I'm glad that she did it because this would not be here if it were for that. And so in that way, sometimes guilt is a very effective motivator, at least for me. But so I would say that for anyone who feels like they struggle with getting things down and getting things finished, if they do know that they want to do it, if they're okay with guilt, if they're okay with pain, and as a writer, you have to be okay with pain and suffering, I think, because it's a painful and sometimes traumatic career in many ways. But I think that you can hold yourself accountable by sharing your work, by having co-conspirators who are there for you, whether they're your agent or your editor, to crack the, or your friend, to crack the whip. I always say that, Danielle Clayton and Ellen O, if it weren't for them bugging me every time I talk to them, what are you writing? I would have probably just slinked away. What's the past tense of slink? Slunk? Slanked? Anyway, I would have just disappeared into the ether. And so I know, I find peer pressure to be an effective form of stimulating my writing.
I like that. I like that. All right, well, it looks like we are about out of time here, but just want to thank everybody for being a part of this panel. This was like a lovely way to spend Saturday morning, seeing all your faces and hearing about your books. Where can everyone find you online?
I'll put my Twitter handle and everything in the chat about that.
Perfect, perfect.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, share your websites. Let's let everyone go find you. And Cordelia, where can we find your lit mag for the kids?
It's a print only lit mag, and for a long time we sold it at the Big Blue Marble bookstore right here in Mount Airy, but we just, and the new issue comes out this Sunday. Actually, I'm having a reading, so it's not really something you could find. it's hyper local, but thank you. Maybe one day. I guess if you happen to be in Mount Airy at the Blue Marble bookstore, you could find it there.
Yeah, there we go.
I have a copy, so Cordelia.
Okay.
One of your best.
Yeah, we usually do. So like many years we've done author interviews in the journal. I like usually run a camp and we do author interviews and book. It's kind of like a journal / magazine, and we have book reviews and games also throughout with the stories and poems and art. But this year I couldn't do the camp, and so it's really just a journal. But sometimes with the author interviews, we've had like pretty big name authors who agree to be interviewed, so that's kind of fun, and then it has like more appeal to a wider network.
That's awesome. I love that you do that for the kids. Is anyone else having trouble seeing their Twitter handles? Oh, everyone is just sharing it with the panelists. Here, I'll paste everyone's things in here. Arlene did that already. Perfect. Cool. All right. I don't know what we do now. I don't know how virtual panels wrap up. I haven't really done any of these. But yeah, thanks for having us 215 Festival. This was super fun, and yeah, I look forward to seeing this again next year.
Certainly. Hi.
Hey, Josh.
Thank you all so much. My name is Joshua Demery. I'm the director of the 215 Festival. This was such a fantastic, fascinating conversation. Best way I can imagine to start my day. And so just so you know, this event will be recorded, and so many people will get to enjoy it in the future online, and we'll share that link with you when the time comes. So yeah, I want to thank everyone so much for attending this kickoff event of the festival day of the 20th anniversary 215 Festival. Very special thank you to all of the panelists who joined us today. And if you like today's event and you want to keep up with festival events all year long, you can sign up on our newsletter at 215festival.org. You can find all of these Twitter handles very easily if you follow us on Twitter at 215festival. I've been resharing promos for this event all week long. And because you kind of kicked off the festival day with us, and I hope you'll come and end the festival day with us. And so we're having a literary dance party tonight starting at 9. It's called Footnotes. That's fun writer wordplay. And so we're using a innovative video conferencing platform called Bramble. And so it allows you to kind of selectively mingle and just chat with, a few people, so that it's not like a Zoom meeting with like 100 people. You can just kind of find it's a virtual world, find a little corner and, kind of chat with everyone. And so that's we invite all of the panelists, of course, and all of the attendees. And it's just a nice way for us all to kind of get together at the end and chat and in an informal way. And we'll have tunes playing that were selected by some of Philly's other best authors and DJs. We have Anne Ishii, Paul Lisicki, Greg Pardlow, Yolanda Wisher, and Patrick Rosal, who have selected the playlists for tonight. And so, yeah, you can find that event and more throughout the day by going to 215festival.org. But yeah, so a final thank you. And I hope everyone will join us at some more panels today.